Welcome back to the Real News Network. I'm Sharmini Pures coming to you from Baltimore. I'm speaking with Steve Horn about the impact of fracking on our groundwater supply, as well as now, according to a recent article that Steve has written, might also be causing earthquakes, not to mention air pollution. We're going to get into that. Steve, tell us about the uncovery that you have made in an article you published looking at a study in Western Canada linking fracking to earthquakes. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so that study, for the first time ever, points to the fact that not only is it waste injection, the stuff that comes after fracking, and when that stuff is injected into the ground, that has been very definitively linked to earthquakes, especially in Oklahoma, Ohio, Arkansas, and elsewhere where they're prominent. But now it's not only that. According to this study, it is the fracking procedure itself, the horizontal drilling process, at least in this area in Canada where that was studied in Alberta, in which the fracking is leading to earthquakes. So that study does not go so far to say that this means because it's happening here that fracking can cause earthquakes. Also, they said that there's something unique about the geological features in this area of Canada. But they did say it's grounds for further study. So it remains to be seen. But as of yet, in the United States, you cannot definitively say that fracking itself causes earthquakes. And in this area in Western Canada, you can say it has led to cases of seismic activity.
And there is some indication that this type of fracking is also contributing to air pollution. Is there any evidence to prove that point?
In terms of air pollution, yes, there are lots of studies and a really good investigation that was done in 2014 by the Center for Public Integrity, the Weather Channel, and Inside Climate News they did together that pointed to Texas in particular and toxic air issues there. And so just reading that investigation, you can see how the lax regulatory regime that exists, the sort of stuff that the federal government is not really watching it closely, and the state government is not watching it really at all. Very few inspectors, is leading to illness in this, in the Eagle Ford Shale in Texas, and it's of course sort of a sacrifice. So most people aren't really paying attention to what's happening in rural Texas, but the investigation is very eye-opening.
And Steve, is there any efforts or attempts going on in terms of closing this Halliburton loophole and protecting our water supply, air, and potential earthquakes at this point?
So that's the big question here is how did this happen? And it happened because there's a law in the books that does not apply to the oil and gas industry that is supposed to be enforced by the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, and that's called RCRA, or the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, that was passed in the 1970s, and it for wastes like these, like injection of waste, solid waste, that sort of thing. The oil and gas industry carved out a loophole in the 1980s, working alongside the EPA. Again, a very politicized study that came out in 1987 and 1988. Basically carved out this exemption that's still on the books today and I will say it happened in concert with the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission that had been working on the RCRA issue, basically, again, since the dawn of the bill. They, again, in their own newsletter in 2006, say this is one of their big issues, and one of their successes was getting this RCRA exemption passed. And so there have been efforts to reverse it, as recently as last year. A representative in Congress, Matt Cartwright in Pennsylvania, called for overturning it and introduced a bill, but didn't really get much traction at all. He actually tried it in 2014 as well. And the NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, put out a report a few years ago, again, calling for this to be overturned. But there, again, it hasn't really gotten too much traction. But I would say that this, to come full circle, this loophole is what is leading to things like the air issues because of toxic waste dumps, the rampant ejection that is leading to earthquakes. And so this loophole is the root of the problem.
Now, the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission, as well as the legislators who backed this kind of exemption, is, I would say, criminally negligent and should be held liable. Is there any such effort going on?
There is I'm glad you mentioned there is a lawsuit that was just filed in Oklahoma, which is earthquake central right now, that was filed by the Sierra Club and other environmental groups against some of the companies that are responsible for this seismic activity, like Chesapeake Energy and others, SandRidge Energy. And so this case just was filed in recent months and hasn't really moved very far yet. It's in federal court in Oklahoma, and we'll see. And it also was filed in state court there. So it remains to be seen what comes out of that lawsuit, but it is the very first major lawsuit filed against this earthquake issue, seismic activity issue. And it cites the RCRA law that we just discussed.
Steve Horn of DeSmogBlog, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.